Embattled Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro defiant in the face of growing protests, claiming what he calls a coup attempt against him has failed. Maduro is also pushing back against the United States over claims by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that Maduro was preparing to flee the country for Cuba yesterday, but was talked out of it by Russia. Joining us now to give us the very latest information, the president's national security advisor, Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us this morning. At 8:16 a.m., what's the situation? It's been so tumultuous over the last 24 hours. What is your understanding of the current situation in Venezuela?
Well, I think what we're expecting to happen today are the long-planned nationwide demonstrations by the opposition against the Maduro regime. We don't know what effect yesterday's violence by the government will have, but certainly these demonstrations have been planned for some time. We think the overwhelming majority of the Venezuelan population oppose Maduro, oppose the Cubans, oppose the Russians. Hopefully we'll see some of that today. In terms of the government itself, I think they're in real trouble. I think we've exposed yesterday that very senior members of the Maduro regime were prepared to deal with the opposition and get him out of power. How they're going to live with each other now is very interesting. Maduro, Padrino, like scorpions in a bottle. I don't think they can trust each other. That's not a sustainable situation.
To that last point, and this is so interesting, it does seem that perhaps things didn't go as you expected them to, because you just brought up the defense minister, Vladimir Padrino, and you have said that in conversations with U.S. officials, he indicated that he would flip, that he would side with Juan Guaido. That didn't happen yesterday. He came out and publicly voiced support for the Venezuelan leader. So what went wrong there?
Well, let me say, these are conversations with the opposition leaders, and I'm sure that someday the documents that Padrino, Moreno, Hernandez-Dala were prepared to sign with the opposition, I bet they'll come out in public someday, too. Look, there's a lot of mistrust inside Venezuela between the opposition and Maduro regime officials. After 20 years of a dictatorship, that's not surprising. Let's be candid as well. Many people in the regime have enormous financial resources they've accumulated over the years. They're reluctant to see that go. But when you have a government begin to fragment, in most circumstances, you'd say it was only a matter of time before it collapsed. And here's where the key difference comes in. The presence of 20 to 25,000 Cuban security forces. Just to give you one example, Maduro yesterday didn't come out in public until the end of the day. He was, we believe, at Fort Tiuna, near Caracas, which is, among other things, it's a military prison. It's also the headquarters of the Cuban command in Venezuela. He was with Cubans because he doubted the loyalty of many of his own forces.
In your administration, the Trump administration has also made the claim that Russia is very much involved in propping up the Maduro regime. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told my colleague Wolf Blitzer yesterday that there was a plane waiting to take Maduro to Cuba, but the Russians talked him out of it. What exactly is the Russian role here?
Look, the Russians like nothing better than putting a thumb in our eye. They're using the Cubans as surrogates. They'd love to get effective control of a country in this hemisphere. It's not ideological. It's just good old-fashioned power politics. That's why we have the Monroe Doctrine, which we're dusting off in this administration. It's why the president indicated last night that the Cubans better think long and hard about what their role is. We're going to continue to...
What has the president said to Vladimir Putin on this subject?
We've made it clear to the Russians in a lot of conversations at a lot of different levels, some of which are going to continue today, why we think this behavior is unacceptable to us. Those conversations are going to go on, but we're not going to limit ourselves to conversations. We're taking steps. We're putting more pressure on the Maduro regime. The effect of the economic sanctions already imposed are drying up revenues to Maduro. He won't be able to pay the service members. He won't be able to put gas in their Jeeps. This is having a profound effect, and it's a cumulative effect over time.
Has the president specifically spoken to Vladimir Putin about Venezuela?
I don't want to get into the specifics of the president's conversations.
But isn't it important? I do want to ask, though, isn't it important, though? This is such a big issue for you. It's such a big issue for the administration. It's such a big issue for America and South America. If this is a priority, doesn't it matter whether or not the president has addressed it directly?
I think the president's addressing it directly all the time. You read his tweets, I'm quite sure. He talked in a tweet last night about a possible embargo to Cuba. We've made it very clear to the Russians. There's no misunderstanding in Moscow. That I am very clear.
What does I understand the president does intend to speak to Vladimir Putin today. Is that correct?
Look, I said before, I'm not going to get into the specifics to that. I think Secretary Pompeo will be addressing his counterpart. We've had a lot of conversations with the Russians, that's for sure.
I just, because I'm reading a transcript of an interview you just did on Fox News.
You want to ask me about Russian collusion?
No, I do not at all. Not even a little. No, Ambassador,
you're
misrepresenting.
I
absolutely want to. I just want to understand what the president has done with, because Russia clearly played a role. Mike Pompeo was talking about it yesterday, and you were mentioning the Cuban relationship. I just want to know what diplomatic pressure the president will exert. And I understand you said moments ago there is a call scheduled for today between the president and Vladimir Putin. Is that correct?
That's not what I said. I said there was a call scheduled between Secretary Pompeo and his counterpart. You can look at your transcript.
Okay. I will go ahead and look at that transcript again. The part I'm looking at right now, it says Ambassador John Bolton told Fox and Friends that President Trump will call Vladimir Putin today following Pompeo's claims that Russia stopped Maduro from leaving Venezuela. But we'll take another look at that. And as you said, that's only one of the issues here. What's the status of Leopoldo Lopez?
That didn't sound like a transcript to me. It sounded like a report.
Okay, this is not. You're missing the overall point here, and I'm not trying to pick a fight on Russia at all.
The one who's missing the point is you.
Okay.
We could have a conversation about Venezuela,
and we are.
And
look, and we are. And if you let me ask the next question, I think one of the most dramatic moments yesterday was seeing Leopoldo Lopez in public in the morning. I found that so surprising and unexpected. He had been released from his house confinement. By the end of the day, he went first to the Chilean embassy and then I think now to the Spanish embassy. What's his status tonight?
Look, the fact is that all of the leaders of the opposition are in danger because of the authoritarian Maduro government, and they have taken steps really over the last 3 months to protect themselves in various ways. Leopoldo Lopez was out of house arrest for the first time in a long time yesterday. And he was understandably concerned about what the Maduro regime might do. So we don't get into discussions about where they are or what they're up to. We'll see what happens today.
I want to play something that Mike Pompeo did say just a short time ago. And this is a question you are asked regularly and has to do with military intervention. You've said that all options remain on the table. Let me just play you the exact language the secretary just used.
The president has been crystal clear and incredibly consistent. Military action is possible. If that's what's required, that's what the United States will do. We'd prefer a peaceful transition of government there where Maduro leaves and a new election is held. But the president has made clear in the event that there comes a moment, and we'll all have to make decisions about when that moment is, and the president will ultimately have to make that decision. He's prepared to do that if that's what's required.
The language the secretary used is if that is what is required. Broadly speaking, what would require U.S. military action?
Well, first, I agree with everything Mike just said. I think the president has been crystal clear, and it's one element of a successful strategy is that you don't necessarily telegraph to your potential opposition what you're going to do or when you're going to do it. We have said repeatedly as well, as Mike said, we want a peaceful transition of power. The Russians could assist that. The Cubans could assist it by returning to Cuba. We're going to continue to work on that basis, but we're having effectively a special meeting of National Security Council principals later today, and I'm sure we'll be talking about a lot of steps.
Very quickly, two last questions. Do you expect that Maduro will be in power at the end of today?
I don't know how one can predict that. I think, as in the case of many authoritarian regimes, what looks like a pretty imposing structure, sometimes one kick at the door and the whole rotten edifice falls down.
All right, and just in closing, because again, I don't want this to be a piece of contention here. I'm just reading from you the transcript that we were given of the Fox News interview, just so our viewers know and you know what I was asking. Brian Kilmeade said to you, if you want to back off the Russians, you have to call the Russians, as the Secretary of State called his counterpart Lavrov. Has President called Vladimir Putin? If so, what was the call like? Then you apparently said the call is scheduled for today. It's an important call.
That's the call between Pompeo and his counterpart.
Okay.
The call has not been made, as I understand it.
Great. Again, that was what the confusion was there, Ambassador. I just wanted people to know, because reading the transcript and looking at that exact question and answer, it could leave the impression you were saying the president would speak to Vladimir Putin. I just wanted you to be aware of why I was asking, and our viewers as well. You do not know of a specific call coming up between the two leaders.
That's correct.
Thank you. Ambassador John Bolton, we do appreciate you coming on and giving clarity to this very tumultuous situation in Venezuela. Thank you, sir.
It's always wonderful.
All right. Thanks, sir. Allison.
All right.